Welcome back. Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi wrapped up his trip to Syria, Egypt, and Algeria on July 21st. It strengthened China-Arab ties, but critics are accusing China of peddling its influence in the Arab world through the Belt and Road Initiative, vaccines as well. What are the main takeaways from this visit? And what is China's vision for dealing with the Syrian crisis? What kind of practical cooperation can materialize among these different countries? Well, joining me today are Mr. Einar Tangen, our current affairs commentator, and Mr. Wang Cong, chief reporter of the Global Times, both in Beijing. Great to see you both. Now, State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi's tri-nation tour of Syria, Egypt, and Algeria from July 17th to 20th really showed China's strong solidarity with some Arab countries, and some also pointed out that it is an emphatic stand against regime change strategy in Syria. Now, his first destination was Syria, Einar, and the foreign minister told Syrian President Bashar al-Assad that China opposes any attempt to seek regime change and supports the UN Security Council's Syria-led, Syrian-owned policy for solving the crisis there. What kind of message does it send to the world, and how do you think it's being received out there?
Well, this is an extension of China's non-interference policy, and it stands in stark contrast to the efforts of the United States. So what he's saying here is quite frankly that China stands against any kind of separatism, any kind of regime change, and they're now backing that up. It also puts them much closer to Iran and also Russia, who are also supporters of that state. So you're seeing a solidification of this kind of, us versus them kind of, international politics. I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing, but it clearly is a hopeful signal for Syria. Obviously, the war has not solved anything.
Well, so, Mr. Wang, so what's your thoughts on this? I mean, what is China prepared to do to assist Syria diplomatically and economically?
Well, first of all, China has always been a partner with the Middle East countries and African countries. We have the Belt and Road, as you mentioned, and since the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been extensive cooperation, both in terms of anti-epidemic efforts and economic recovery. So this trip, although many Western media outlets view this through a lens of the U.S. influence, of the Western influence in the Middle East, but the ultimate goal of this trip by Mr. Wang is to expand those cooperation. And also, I think China, as China's global profile continues to rise, it is a part of the UN Security Council, and it has a responsibility for not only regional, global and regional peace. So China, I think Mr. Wang is trying to make China's stance clear, which is non-interference and completely upheld the UN system and sovereignty. I think that not only China's stance with regard to countries in the Middle East, it is also what China experienced in itself with the U.S. U.S. and some Western countries constantly pointing fingers at China over a wide range of issues. So this is mostly about China and these countries expanding cooperation. However, as the U.S. leaving a mess in the region, China is stepping up as a responsible power.
So China's foreign policy has been largely consistent, and Foreign Minister Wang Yi also welcomed Syria to join the Belt and Road Initiative. But what can Damascus bring to the initiative, Einar? How would it help the battered Syrian economy? Would it be really feasible given the security situation there?
Well, the security situation will only improve if other countries step out of the equation and stop, in essence, promoting and prolonging this war. That's from Beijing's perspective. Obviously, Syria, after all of these wars, the infrastructure is battered and needs to be done. But, what the larger picture you see here is he's visited 3 countries. He's not asking them to form a coalition against the United States or Europe or anybody else. What he's done is he's brought very specific things to each country to stabilize the region and not talk about security and moving forward, but actually doing something about it. And the Belt and Road Initiative is part of that.
And about Egypt, that's the second leg of the foreign minister's tour. There were many significant developments. Egypt was the first Arab and African country to have diplomatic ties with China, and that tie is now 65 years young. And China has constructed the first COVID-19 vaccine production line in Egypt. And the two countries have now jointly produced the first batch of 1 million doses of vaccination. That's pretty significant. And Mr. Wang, so how does the COVID-19 cooperation strengthen this relationship?
Well, the COVID-19, if anything, was a topic that created some challenge for international relations because there were enough finger pointing going on, So with regard to China and Egypt specifically, you mentioned the vaccine production program. But since then, not only China has helped in terms of vaccine, it also helped in terms of this, in terms of information sharing. Economic recovery is a very big part of the cooperation. I think China and Egypt has always been a very close partners in terms of the Belt and Road, and the COVID-19 has only the COVID-19 did not stop those cooperation and has only brought those cooperations even closer because we have China has a lot of interest and investments in Egypt, ports, highways. And I think now with the COVID-19 is largely controlled global, worldwide. I think it's the next step that we have to step up on the economic cooperation front. That's what's this about, I think, with Mr. Wang's trip to Egypt.
But some critics are saying that China is using this quote-unquote half diplomacy to increase its influence in certain countries and regions. Einar, what's the reality there?
Reality is that less than 2% of the people in Africa have received a vaccine jab. And there's nothing on the horizon that's really moving towards it. I mean, the UN program, COVAX, is trying, but it's being held up because basically developed countries and their corporations refuse to give IP waivers so that these countries can go ahead. For some reason, their profits are more important and then these lives. China has stepped up. They're actually putting these plants in not only in the Middle East, but also South America. They have 8 that are actually negotiated and 10 more that are out there. China's put out 350 million vaccine jabs. The U.S. is struggling to meet just a few tens of millions of those. So what you have here is the West is complaining that China is doing well, that it's actually able to help out. And it's not only in the vaccine, it's also on the peace front in Syria, and then also in Algeria in terms of doing something to help them so that they can improve their trade.
The foreign minister's third leg final destination is Algeria. He had a pretty packed schedule. The two sides reached 4 points of consensus. Mr. Wang Cong, this include a practical cooperation, the Hamdania Central Port Project, which will be Algeria's first deep water port jointly built by the two sides. This is an example of practical cooperation. But how will this port benefit the Algerian and regional economy, especially given the fact that it is a regional hub for North Africa on the Mediterranean?
Well, first of all, I want to add a little bit about what these Western media outlets saying about China extending its influence through the Belt and Road and the called COVID vaccine diplomacy. I think that's the fundamental difference. When the U.S. comes to these regions, these countries, they're seeking cooperation, but there are conditions, political conditions imposed. When China comes to these regions, they're proposing mutually beneficial cooperation projects without any political condition. That's the difference, and they don't get it. Really, they don't get the concept because that's not their approach in the West. So, with regard to the cooperation, what China, it's mutually beneficial, obviously, because for example, this country, Algeria, is a crucial getaway if this port is built to trade not only with China but with a lot of countries in the region and Asia, because what Africa really needs is infrastructure, and not only roads and highways within the continent, but actually ports and trade routes. And this is what is being built. ports that will bring a lot of business opportunity to not only the local economy, but to the regional economy. That's the fundamental difference between China's cooperation with these countries and U.S. cooperation or U.S. investment in Africa and the Middle East with political conditions. China's is, I think, this is the example. Mutual beneficial.
Right. Before we go, Einar, Wang Yi also met with Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abu Ghait, and they agreed to hold this first China-Arab summit in Saudi Arabia next year. I mean, what's the goal of this summit since there is already a China-Arab ministerial forum?
Well, it's really to talk about the peace process, how to bring things back. I mean, obviously the U.S. has pulled out. There's a sense that the Middle East has been broken by years of interference, and there's a desire to bring together a group that is not being imposed on and being told how they should govern themselves, but simply looking for regional answers to very, very, very complex equations and questions.
Thank you very much for analysis, Mr. Einar Tangen, our current affairs commentator, and Mr. Wang Cong, our chief reporter at the Global Times. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point. As always, follow us on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Liuxin in Beijing. Download the CGTN app to watch our show or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. On behalf of our team, thank you so much for watching and have a good one.